Speaking of mental health, this tweet right here, this tweet made me feel unsafe in my own home. I'm in this picture and I don't like it. And I agree with this person. I am also in this picture and I don't like it. The neurodivergent experience is thinking you're sharing fun, interesting, or helpful information in a normal human conversational fashion, while they think you're an asshole lecturing them or looking down at them like they're stupid, and also that no matter how many times you have this experience, you always think you're doing it the right way this time. I feel attacked. I feel seen in the wrong way, really. Because it is such a common thing for me, because that's how I try to form connections. I vomit facts at people, and that's where I'm most comfortable, is vomiting facts at people. And that's how that's my form of affection, is just fact bombing people. It's like, hey, did you know this? Did you know that? Did you know this? Did you know that? Did you know this? Did you know that? It's like, and it just overwhelms, just overrides everyone and everything all at once. I've had to train myself to ask questions and to engage in small talk, because small talk, sometimes I'm really good at it. Other times it's excruciating and there's no consistency there, but I've had to train myself to do it, and I need to continue doing more training with it, because and I'm not that good at it. Not that good. I'm really good at telling jokes. I'm really good at turning things into jokes. Unfortunately, not everything can be turned into a joke, especially if they mention like their mum died or something. That's normally when I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I have so many jokes I could make, but I'm not going to, because fuck. So this is our segue. You know, this is such a fucking feel, that tweet, and it's also the perfect segue into our next topic. Have you considered just vomiting on them? You know what they say, walk and carry a big vomit. Walk and carry a big vomit. I don't even know what the original version of that was supposed to be. It's so been distorted. Did you know in Spider-Man 2, Venom was originally supposed to be animatronic? I remember there was like an animatronic Venom in one of those trailers, wasn't there? And then they painted over him with the CG and didn't look as good. Oh, big stick. I see. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I've got ADHD, comorbid with autism as well. And that's a beautiful word. I didn't know the word comorbid until I heard it used by someone else. And comorbid basically just means it is a disorder that is also with this other disorder. So it's a very useful word to use, is that you've got something that's comorbid with something else. So I've got ADHD, comorbid with anxiety, all of that. So because of this, I imagine neurodiversity is going to be a recurring subject on the show as a result. This is something that is very present in my day-to-day existence. It's not my entire identity, to be sure, but it is something that informs who I am. It is something that informs what I do, how I behave, how I act, how I engage with the world at large. It's how my brain is structured. So as a result, it's something that's pretty relevant. Something I think this show's a good platform to talk about. Talk about those experiences in like just a nice kind of chillaxed way, I think. What a rough combo. Something interesting to me is how we're finally starting to take ADHD seriously, when really it really shouldn't have taken this long. So ADHD is in a weird spot as far as these disorders are concerned. It is such a serious condition. It is so it affects your life in such a fundamental way. But because it presents in a way that people can brush off as bad behavior, as laziness, as, oh, you just need to apply yourself, that sort of thing, because it manifests itself in ways that can be seen in other ways, people struggle to take it seriously as a disorder. And the number of people who say that, oh, yeah, it's a fictional disorder created to drug kids or whatever, it's just like, dude, just don't, do not do that. Stop. Yeah, it is quite the challenge to diagnose, especially because there are symptoms of, apparently there's stuff on one of the symptoms is hyperfixating, because there's like two states with ADHD, right? It's either you are hyperfixating on a singular thing, or your focus is just going ding, 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 ding. It's like a game of ping pong. You can't focus on any one thing at any one time. That's kind of, it's interesting because a lot of people think ADHD means you have no focus, when actually it just means your focus is dysregulated. Your ability to regulate your focus is compromised. So it's actually almost like you have too much focus. Like you don't know, you have so much focus, you don't know what the fuck to do with it. But unfortunately, hyperfocus isn't on the DSM-5, so that's another thing that makes it quite difficult. And we have other problems like our women with ADHD tend to mask their ADHD a lot more. So there's underdiagnosis of females with ADHD, unfortunately. It presents quite differently in women than it does to men. So that's a challenge that's had to be overcome over the course of quite a few years. Like there was a point, autism and ADHD, there was a point where people, at least the layman at the very least, believed that only boys got it. And now we know, no, everyone can get it. It's just that there's a lot of differences between men and women that need to be accounted for, both societally and biologically. And I think a lot of this, it shows how we collectively tend to treat disabilities as a society, where unless something is really obviously wrong with you, we don't seem to like acknowledging it. We don't like to acknowledge certain conditions or disorders, and we'd rather just put blame on these behaviors. We'd rather turn them into moral failings of the person rather than trying to look deeper and try to assess them psychologically, try to figure out, okay, there's clearly something not connecting in that brain. It's very annoying, to be sure. It manifests in a very annoying way, but we got to figure it out. I think it's far more difficult to engage with it like that. And as a result, a lot of people, they get dismissed as just the bad kids, the bad eggs, when really they've got something that needs to be treated, something that needs to be engaged with. I put in my notes here, and I think I've already mentioned, a lot of the common lines are, they've got so much potential, if only they applied themselves, or you just need to try harder. It's like, maybe the kid is trying as hard as they can, but they're wrangling with something you can't see. Like maybe this is something you need to encourage the parents to get like an ongoing assessment for. It's so like I had to deal with that a lot as a kid. There was learning support staff at schools, at the schools I went to, but they were treating me like I had Down syndrome. Like they weren't treating me as they weren't treating me my age and just giving me assistance for my deficits. They were instead treating me like I was 4 years old. And it was really, I had to fight so hard just to get treated normally, or treated proportionately. Because it's that back and forth. It's either someone overcompensates for how much they are accommodating, or they just don't accommodate at all. And then you have huge problems that come from that, and hugely damaging problems that can come from that. It's insanely, I can't understate just how important it is to get these diagnoses. People with ADHD do have immense potential, but working harder is never going to be a sustainable solution. There are people who unironically believe, I'm reading from my notes at this point, so I've kind of already said this, but who unironically believe ADHD isn't real, and that everyone has a little ADHD. Everyone has a little ADHD. It's okay. It's like, no, that's nonsense. That is pure nonsense. It's like saying, oh, everyone has a little bit of autism. Everyone has a little bit of psychopathy. Everyone has a little bit of cancer. Everyone has a little bit of schizophrenia. Everyone has a little bit of Parkinson's disease. Everyone has a little bit of Alzheimer's, just a little bit. Everyone has a little bit of erectile dysfunction. This is not, it's such it is like, this is one of those things that people say without thinking about it. And it is so absurd when you actually think about it. Just a little bit, just a tiny bit. I am a neuroscientist. I accidentally ended up studying, went off the screen. I want to read the neuroscientist contribution. I accidentally ended up studying ADHD and autism and how they cross over for years, which was fascinating. Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I like it. I like it when people who are in their element show up in chat. They always have such great contributions, especially when it's like on topic. Oh, I love it. If I had to guess, it's probably because we want to dismiss the more annoying behaviors of ASD. Not ASD, that's autism spectrum disorder. That's probably also true for that, but ADHD as simply being bad behavior and trying to attribute it to something easily solvable rather than wrangle with the complex reality of a divergent mind that operates in a different way. Thankfully, the discourse is starting to shift. ADHD is finally being recognized as a disability that does require treatment and support the same as any other. Doctors are now more willing to write notes of recommendation for things like support animals on the basis of ADHD, and things like the NDIS here in Australia, which is the National Disability Insurance Scheme, is now considering ADHD to be added to the list of supported conditions. So NDIS, the very broad stroke version of what it is that, it is basically a grant that you give, that the government, that this department called the NDIS gives to people with disabilities to help them pay for things that will assist them with their disability, whether that's support workers, technology that'll make their lives easier, things like that. If they have a support animal, training for their support animal, anything that's going to be assistive. Like there's different, they assign different, but like they give you a broad amount of money, and then they say you can use this amount of money for support work and stuff like that, this amount for technology, this amount for this thing. It's all just about, because obviously a lot of people with disabilities, they're not exactly flush with cash. Let's put it that way. And their ability to be flush with cash is, how shall we say, extremely limited. So this is kind of one of those equity things where it's kind of just trying to even the scales for someone who does have a disability that requires additional needs that they can't afford out of pocket. So it's a really good thing, in my opinion. It's there's a lot of bureaucracy going on around it that I don't really want to get into, but I think, conceptually, I agree with it. I agree with its purpose. I think it's a very good thing. I think a large part of why ADHD is now finally starting to come into the light, this thing that needs to be, that should be taken seriously, that should be looked at. I think a large part of it is because we now have so many platforms to give us a voice that we previously didn't have, and we understand the disorder a lot better than we used to. I was talking to my therapist about it just yesterday, in fact, and she said, there was a similar emphasis on ADHD like about 20 years ago, but that one kind of petered out because everyone was dismissing it. Everyone was calling it a fake disorder or saying, oh, you just need to try harder, la-di-da-di-da-di-da, all the classic stuff, and then that kind of petered out. But now we've got stuff like YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and even, God forbid, TikTok. Whatever we might think of these entities as a whole, they have been an amazing driving force in raising awareness of the seriousness of ADHD. And hopefully, through this podcast that you are listening to right now with your ears, I can add my own contributions to this cause, which is, of course, very close to my heart. Something this has also allowed is for a decrease in the overall stigma surrounding ADHD. The unfortunate reality of the condition is that we present very well. That's something I have been told time and time again, and it was a compliment once upon a time. And now it's like, yeah, I know I do present very well. I do present very neurotypically. I do know that it is very difficult, that at first glance, it is difficult to pick me out in a crowd as the disabled one. I know all too well. It means that I'm, pursuing an acting career. That means I'm quite successful at presenting in a way that I am not. It means that I can turn that into a fun game. It means I'm very good at a lot of different things. It also means that people apply standards to me that are often just unfair, plain and simple. And they will ask things of me that perhaps they're not even intent. It's not malicious. I'm not blaming anyone. It's a spectrum, right? Some people should know better than others. But as a general thing, presenting well has, it has big upsides. It means that I can control when people know about this disorder, so they can take me seriously as a person first before I get any labels involved and have preconceptions piled on top. I think that's good. I think that's a good thing for me personally. That gives me a level of personal control. It also means that until I can drop the veil and people, just kind of, I've developed, just a respect for me independent of knowing the condition. It means that I am being put under standards that, again, it's a little bit like asking someone in a wheelchair to stand up sometimes. It does feel like sometimes things are a little bit set up to fail. Can be a distressing experience, to say the least. Shut the fuck up, phone. Shut your mouth. Let's see, where was I up to? Let's see. We don't look or sound disabled on initial impression, so problems are dismissed or minimized. For a while, it either felt like you would either be treated like you had a severe learning disability, or you were otherwise treated as neurotypical. We are now finally, as a society, etching out a space in between where we can recognize the needs without someone needing to be, drooling on the floor, barely able to comprehend basic numbers and shapes. For my part, I'm trying to untrain that part of me that was afraid to talk about the support structures I have in place. I do have NDIS support thanks to the autism side of things, but I'm slowly realizing that it's perhaps more useful for the ADHD. I have cleaners that come around 2 or 3 times a week because my executive dysfunction makes it difficult to clean. Indeed, I'm less ashamed to say that I struggle to keep my environment tidy in general, as that is just the reality of my condition rather than something that requires scolding. We've still got a way to go, but I'm happy with the progress we are making. Part and parcel with finally acknowledging ADHD as a disability, but also giving credit to its potential strengths when put into an environment where it is allowed to thrive. It's a misconception that ADHD is an inability to focus. I think I already mentioned this. It's that difficulty with regulating focus. So there are times where I can barely focus on something for 30 seconds straight. And then there are other times where I will fixate on something for 24 hours without eating or even standing up. Like my ass will go numb. Circulation is probably not great, but I'm in that mode where I know that if I break my concentration on this thing, I might not get it back. So I just want to keep doing the things that are in my brain until it manifests. And that can often go for hours and hours and hours and hours, because another part of ADHD is something called time blindness. I have no intuitive sense of the passage of time. So things can just blow by, and I need to check a clock in order to see how much time has passed. Like this, it's the kind of thing where I blink and 5 minutes have passed without me knowing it. I thought it was 2 seconds. It was 5 minutes. Like it's that kind of thing. I lose time so easily. It almost makes me want to put cameras everywhere just to see what I was doing in that space of time where I thought it was only 2 seconds, but really it was 5 minutes. That would be fascinating to me. You know, my very first EFAP meme, so that's the Mortal Kombat one. You can still find it on the channel. That took me over 24 hours to put together. And I think I maybe took a single break to feed my cat during that entire time. Maybe. I didn't eat. I barely had any water. I just kept going and going because I kept coming up with new ideas, and I just wanted to get it done, and I powered through it. Honestly, though, the work I did in that original meme, I could probably get it done in like an hour now, maybe a shorter amount of times, because I my skills have gotten a lot better since that original meme, because that's the benefit of growing and learn to use your tools better. But that's the kind of fixation that can happen and how all-consuming it can be. Like, I actually got hyper fixated writing notes for this yesterday because I had procrastinated on some of the meatier parts of this that I needed to get together, and I didn't realize just how much stuff I needed to say. And then I had to write even more this morning, which is why I had to delay the stream, because I didn't realize how long that would take. It affects a lot more of your life than you would ever realize. And I would definitely, if I had a choice, I would maybe want to like downplay the downs. I would definitely want to deal with the downsides, but I don't think I would want to change how my brain works completely, because the thing that causes me to sit and focus for 24 hours straight is also the thing that gives me the best ideas, that allows me to make the stuff that is really entertaining. I don't think I would be making the things that I am. I don't think I would be as creative as I am if it wasn't for the ADHD. It is as I said, it's twice exceptional. Exceptionally amazing at certain things, exceptionally not so good at a lot of other things. It's ADHD, and being neurodivergent in general. It's like min-maxing in an RPG. Instead of like spreading your points across multiple different stats, you instead put it all into like 2 or 3, and then the rest are just kind of get to sit back and suffer. So you start with huge advantages over other people and I don't know how this is possible, but it is right there in the baby book. My parents swear by it. My first word was at 3 months old. So I was ahead of everyone developmentally with language. I was behind on almost everything else. Like, that was the trade-off. There's a lot of things in my early 20s that most people get down when they're only teenagers. But of course, my ability to hyperfixate on certain things then allows me to like exceed certain people in certain areas, depending on what I'm hyperfixating on. It's such a deeply complex disorder, so I wouldn't want to sell it as like it having no upside. It's more just the downsides really need to be acknowledged, and they really need to be. We need to be allowed to treat it as a disability without it turning into like, you know, looking down on people, I guess, might be the way to put it, or either trying to minimize it or over exaggerate it as well. Like, there's a fine line. Yeah, I think I've written it here. As you can imagine, hyperfixation, when you get it to work for you, can turn into an invaluable asset. It can make you hyperproductive and give you these huge bursts of dominating your goals, but it's fickle and often hard to capture, which can result in frustrating inconsistencies. Every person with ADHD is different and will find different solutions to these problems. But we have to recognize that these issues are based in concrete neurology rather than being dismissive because it doesn't look so hard on the surface. You might as well tell someone with a permanent limp to start walking, if that's the road you want to go down. Much like those with physical disabilities, we're also starting to see tech solutions to help people like myself with their day-to-day life that simply weren't available before. There are smartphone apps, for example, that are designed to gamify your routine. Gamification in general, that is structuring your life in the same way that a video game would structure quests, is a very popular solution to navigate the neurodivergent waters. Something that would really help me specifically would be if there was an app that added tooltips or reminders to other apps, much like how a video game will remind you about specific gameplay mechanics when they're relevant. For example, I want to set up more rules around how I divert the money that goes into my account. Right now, I take half out and put it away for tax time, and the rest just sits there waiting to be splurged. What I want to start doing is diverting the remaining funds into other accounts. So $20 into my cat account in case I have unexpected pet-related expenses, $20 into car maintenance, that kind of thing. Last time I got paid, I did actually do that, but it would be helpful if I could install an app and get a custom interface that would allow me to get these reminders in the phone itself, rather than having to rely on my own memory to do it. Sure, it all eventually becomes habit, but I've got to form the habit first, and even then, the reminder stops me from blanking one day, which can quickly spiral. Healthy Gamer GG, he also knows, that's the channel name, the doctor's name is Dr. K. He described ADHD in relation to memory as having all the RAM in the world, but what you really need is a hard drive. Like, you need something concrete to store memories on to help with that short, you're all random access memory, no actual memory. It's you can do all the things all at once, but actually keeping the information there is very difficult. And no matter how much, and you can keep installing RAM as someone with ADHD, but you really, really fucking need a hard drive at some point, you know? Hello, Meme. How you doing? I'm doing well, Charles. How are you? Animal ownership can often be a benefit because it gives me a responsibility that I'm invested in emotionally that I literally can't ignore. Believe me, I never hear the last of my fixations cutting into their meal time. So having cats has been really helpful for me because they will tell me when they're hungry. They will make it clear when I'm not spending enough time with them, and they will force me to break away from things and spend time with them. So it means I do have to maintain something of a routine in order to take care of them. It's not perfect, but it has been this really wonderful grounding structure that's really helped me. So you have no long-term memory, or do you just have trouble? It's more, I do have long-term memory. It's much more difficult for me to commit things to memory consistently. Much harder for me to retain information than it is for other people. And it's very selective as to whether or not I retain information. Sometimes I absorb facts like a vacuum cleaner. Other times you can read me something 40 times and I'm not going to be able to remember it. That's exactly it. It's more priority of what sticks. Let's see. going to the library and the gym has helped keep a routine. Yeah, I'm trying to incorporate. I'm trying to incorporate more external stuff because one of the main things about ADHD, one of the things that really helps is you need to find things that generate dopamine. Now, medication does this, and I take medication for it, and it really helps me. What it does is it generates dopamine for my prefrontal cortex, which is where a lot of the problems happen. That's where a lot of the underdevelopment happens, where impulse control is located. It's where, the emotional dysregulation happens. It's where our ability to prioritize, it's where that's supposed to happen. And people with ADHD, they are chronically understimulated because we don't process dopamine correctly. So as a result, we're just these huge dopamine magnets because we need much higher levels of stimulation to reach a point of functional stimulation, I guess is the way to put it. Because like you put someone in an empty room, they will be at like a neutral level of stimulation. You put an ADHD person in an empty room, they will be in pain from how understimulated they are. Like another way to describe ADHD is it's almost, it is being clinically bored. So like a regular person is bored, right? It's just kind of like, it's kind of like whatever. If someone with ADHD is bored, they're in physical pain. I don't know if that's literal. I don't know if pain receptors are actually activated, but it does feel painful. It is agonizing to be bored as someone with ADHD. And that's why we're constantly just seeking out new sources of stimulation because we need it just to be functional. Cocaine. Yes, like cocaine, like addiction is very, very common with ADHD for that reason. It takes so much more effort to be self-disciplined as ADHD. Something interesting I noticed about my ADHD was the masking. Now, I've used that term before, but what does it actually mean? Masking can be defined as learning to depress the symptoms of your neurological disorder to make the world at large more comfortable with your existence. So at a very young age, our symptoms manifest. And as I said before, they are very annoying symptoms to a lot of people. We get punished for our symptoms, both by authority figures and by, people our own age. The other kids on the playground don't want to be around the weird kid. So what do we learn to do? We learn to hide them. We learn to mask them. We learn to cover up our hyperactivity. We learn to present well. We learn to present as normal, quote unquote. And as a result of that, there are benefits to it. Like it almost does feel like stealth mode. It can be kind of fun sometimes, but it also means that, while it allows us certain benefits in social situations to be sure. It also, what does it do? It means that we are, how do I put it? We can't just hide the symptoms and they go away, right? They're still there. It's just that now we are not, the behaviors we manifest aren't just the symptoms. They are the mechanisms through which we deal with the disorder. So someone's really hyperactive. They're fluttering their arms about. They're fidgeting all the time. I read I didn't read the whole paper, but I did read the summary of a paper that basically states that ADHD people fidget and move around all the time, not because they're anxious. I mean, maybe that's part of it, but a lot of it is because that's how we generate energy. That's how we are constantly trying to stimulate ourselves in order to get up to that regular, in order to get up to that, again, what to a lot of people is just their regular level of stimulation. We have to constantly be moving around, constantly doing something that is stimulating us, something that is generating dopamine so that it goes up to our prefrontal cortex and then we get set to normal. Like, I'll put it this way. You give a stimulant to a regular person, they get jittery because that's way too much dopamine. You give a stimulant to an ADHD person, assuming it is correctly dosed, they might fall asleep because their brain is finally up to an adequate level of stimulation and they can finally just relax. They can finally just, oh man, finally fucking dopamine. Oh my God, this feels so good. It's like you're starving and you finally have a burger. It's similar to that. I would recommend finishing that whole paper meme, reading Astro. And I completely agree. Memes stop scaring me because caffeine does nothing for me. Well, it might be a sign of something. It might be a sign of nothing because sometimes some people's brains just don't process caffeine well. Now I want a burger. Yeah, burgers are good. Burgers are really good. So part of my masking So I used to stand up for myself a lot when I was really, really young. And then the more I stood up for myself, the more punishment I got, whether it was from teachers, whether it was from other people, like friends. And eventually I got to the point where I just started thinking, well, if I'm having to stand up to all these people all the time, that must mean there's something wrong with me. So I stopped standing up for myself out of fear of judgment because I just wanted friends and to be able to function correctly. And that led to huge amounts of burnout, especially when I was studying, for example. I pushed myself way harder than I ever should have while I was doing my acting studies, and it drained the life out of me despite everyone commenting on how much I improved. So first year of studies, I did okay to really shit. That's the word. Really shit to okay. That was the first year. You know, as everyone says, lots of potential. He just needs to apply himself. And so I applied myself for the next year and half a year after that. And I got so much more, such greatly improved results. And then when I graduated, I thought I had clinical depression because I was so burned out. I just couldn't do anything. I was non-functional. And that was a very dangerous place to get in. I was also like in a very toxic relationship at the end of that tenure. So that was like another thing just pulling me down. But it was also just, I pushed myself to my limit. Having ADHD, it means applying 10 times the amount of effort to get 1/10 of the result, is the way of a normal, neurotypical person. Okay. So you mistook people's criticism of you as you need to work harder. It's quite common. Learning takes time and over practice, can, lead to burnout. Yeah, well, a lot of people were literally saying I needed to work harder or I needed to just apply myself or you could do so much more if you just applied yourself, that kind of thing. Maybe you're talking about the same thing. I don't know. But yeah, I did burn myself through over practice. And masking isn't just trying to take on, a neurotypical workload against your better judgment. It is also subtler things like sitting still when my neurodivergent brain requires a constant level of, one of the many symptoms of ADHD is chronic understimulation. I've kind of already gotten into this, due to the brain's compromised ability to process dopamine. That's where the hyperactivity part of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder comes from. And if we can't express that hyperactivity through fidgeting or other behaviors, we begin to internalize it, and that becomes a truly torturous, pent-up existence. I really came to realize how badly this was affecting me when I started making appearances on EFAP. Not because the guys were pressuring me. God, no. The EFAP crew makes me feel very accepted. It's more that I had this masking behavior so thoroughly ingrained into my system that I'd go the entire podcast, which, as some of you know, can last for 11 hours or more, sitting absolutely ramrod stiff. I was masking, even when no one could see what I was doing. I was just afraid someone would hear me fidgeting. I was scared that they would think I'm a weirdo. Not consciously, but subconsciously, I had processed that. I've been so conditioned to not, I suppose, out myself as not being typical, which, not healthy. What's more, I had a relationship back in 2019 with someone who also had ADHD. One of her reasons for ending the relationship was that she had barriers in her head that she thought would drop if she met the right person. And because they weren't dropping with me, despite me ticking all the boxes, she realized that she had a lot of personal growth to do. She had only been diagnosed that year. Like, I was diagnosed at age 5, so I actually had a huge advantage over most people. Like, I got diagnosed as soon as you could be diagnosed. Like, I am insanely fortunate in that regard. Like, they were assessing me at age 3. You can only give a diagnosis at age 5, but they were starting the assessment early. Because I think my mom was just like, oh, he's not acting normally. Why is he touching everything? Oh no. Why does he, this isn't normal crying. What the hell? So I got the diagnoses pretty early on. So when this relationship ended, I was more focused on the heartbreak of the event for the longest time. I was trying to just process the feelings, like trying to just pull it back together because it was a very sudden thing. But with distance comes perspective, and now I do have a different perspective, especially now that I've like doubled down on like trying to understand the ADHD part of myself. The barriers she was describing were her mask. They'd been so thoroughly ingrained that they had come to dominate her life to the point where she couldn't drop them. And when you can't drop that facade, even in front of your intimate partner, it becomes a deeply exhausting experience. With those revelations, I've come to realize that there are certain things that need to change with me. So I've begun a new chapter of personal development where I'm trying to drop my masks as best I can whenever I feel I can, rather than allowing them to seep into my very DNA. One of the other things I'd like to cover before moving on to the next subject is the symptom of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which I didn't actually know about until recently. It makes so much sense to me. It's kind of all there in the name. It's part of the general emotional dysregulation that is part and parcel with ADHD most of the time. It is a disproportionate emotional pain in response to perceived rejection. Now, notice how it's labeled as perceived rejection rather than just being rejection. See, while it does occur with actual rejection, such as someone turning you down to go on a date, this aspect of emotional dysregulation goes deeper, distorting fairly healthy, benign encounters into being emotionally interpreted as rejection. Constructive criticism, for example, which is only being given to help you improve, may be interpreted by the brain as downright dismissal of you as a person as a whole. So instead of them saying, yeah, your work here could improve, you instead interpret it as you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. Like it distorts it. It's actually, it's not just an ADHD thing. It's in like a lot of personality disorders as well, like borderline personality disorder. It's a huge part of that disorder. And because like people with ADHD, they do engage with emotional reasoning, which is to say your perception of reality isn't being entirely defined about how you feel. We do have a sense of identity that helps to ground us and helps us to overcome these symptoms. Someone with BPD has a much harder time overcoming that because their brain is structured in such a way that they can't form a solid sense of identity. It keeps shifting. They keep taking bits and pieces from other people. It makes it very difficult as a result. Oh, hello, bots. What's up? Wasabi. Do you have friends with ADHD? I have a lot of friends with ADHD. I think I also probably have a lot of friends who have ADHD but don't have the diagnosis. I think this is something interesting, right? Because I've lived with it for so long, because I've learned to recognize it within myself and within others, I'm starting to realize that I don't know how many neurotypical friends I actually have, because that number keeps dwindling. It's almost like I spread the plague of neurodivergence to other people. It's kind of funny. But I do have a lot of friends with ADHD, yeah. Meme got a girlfriend and all I got was the bots. Hey man, sure it was a lovely ladybot. Meme is an autistic guru. Damn straight, son. Damn straight. Plague, eh? Ah, good timing. Good timing. Good timing. So the rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it's definitely something I've struggled with and something I'm really trying to become more aware of with my mindfulness practice. I'm just trying to observe the feeling and objectively determine if I have enough data to warrant a certain reaction to it. That doesn't mean I've hacked the system or anything, but it does help to avoid conflict where there need be none. Vaccines didn't make me autistic. The internet did. I think it also goes a long way to explain why people get so heated on Twitter, for example, as there's probably a lot of people on that site that have some kind of psychological condition that has rejection sensitivity as one of the symptoms. So any disagreement is automatically taken personally to begin with. And when you compound how shittily Twitter is set up to begin with, well, it's a recipe for fuck. It is a recipe for fuck. A recipe for fuck. for some channels that specialize in ADHD, I recommend How to ADHD, run by the lovely Jessica McKay, who specializes in short form, easy to understand summary videos about how ADHD affects various aspects of life before brainstorming possible solutions. So I'm just going to quickly, I should have had the link probably set up ahead of time. That would have been a smarty pants thing to do. So yeah, if you want something more short form here, this is a really good channel for that. She does it in very tight little packages that give you everything you need to know in a very short space of time. But we are long people here. We are children of the long. We like long. We appreciate long. This podcast has gone on for a long time already, and I'm not even halfway through my notes. So this is giving me an idea of how long the long is, and how much I can get through. I almost overstuffed this podcast, to tell you the truth, just as a test for this first encounter, just see what the limits were for how long I'd ramble. However, if you want someone who is got long form content for ADHD, I would recommend checking out Healthy Gamer GG. I actually already mentioned them. It's a channel run by one Dr. K, and he is an actual clinical psychiatrist, who is able to go in depth on a lot of facets of ADHD without being ultra dry and clinical about it. He also tackles other various aspects of mental health as well, which is really cool. So I reckon these are the two channels that I go to. There are a bunch of other channels on YouTube, don't get me wrong, but these are like the two I gravitate towards. So I kind of just want to, you have me curious on if exercise can be a treatment option for it. Oh, Swalpool, I'm so happy you mentioned that. Exercise is one of the best treatments for ADHD because it generates so many vital neurotransmitters that are so crucial to help an ADHD person function. In fact, my medication right now is not as effective as it used to be because I'm currently in a bit of a slump with exercising, which I'm hoping to break eventually. This podcast is actually part of it so that I can I'm trying to structure my world a little bit more so I can get ADHD, so I can get the gym back into my life. But yeah, it is so crucial because I used to just work out to feel good. And then I realized working out is actually essential for my neurology. So yeah, ADHD, I would say what I'm actually looking for right now is like a personal trainer who is knowledgeable about ADHD, because I realize that is what I need. I need a workout program that is specialized for ADHD. Do you know if aerobic exercises or anaerobic exercises? That's a good question. What generates more dopamine? What I guess that would be like, that's my main knowledge on it. Is that it's all about like what generates the neurotransmitters there. The best exercise for ADHD is the one you can consistently do. I think that's the important part. They're the exercises that you can stay consistent with. Because ultimately, like, there's the scientific, I suppose you can call it like, there's probably like if you look at the raw neurotransmitter levels, there's probably like data that points, these are the best ones technically. But you also need to like individually ask, what exercises am I able to maintain versus the ones that I'm just going to quit on? Because it's much easier to quit with ADHD. Aerobic exercises are better for depression. Then possibly that would be the same for ADHD? Maybe. Yeah, because weightlifting makes me feel really good. It's definitely there's a lot of science that definitely to look into there. How to ADHD does actually have I think a couple of videos on ADHD and exercise and how to keep that consistent. Healthy Gamer GG probably does as well, considering the title of his channel, but. Yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head with him. Yeah, it is fascinating. And I think, yeah, exercise is like, because medication, that is part of the treatment plan, but you also need a lot of ADHD is lifestyle stuff. So the correct amount of, a diet that you can, like, I don't like the word diet because I like a word because it implies that you're going to go off the diet at some point. So I guess an eating plan, a food plan, that is something you can maintain and has all the nutrients in it. That's essential as well, because obviously we as ADHD people, we struggle to eat because eating can be boring, and we don't like boring. We don't like a lot. So it's a lot of So, it's part of the treatment plan is finding sustainable lifestyle choices that you can stick with, and not just stick with, but if you fall off the wagon, you can easily get back into it, if that makes sense. Nothing worse than you falling off the wagon and then it's like a long journey to getting back on the wagon. That's something that's also very important. I think ADHD and exercise, yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, Swalpool, because that is a very, that's very like a bedrock level sort of thing. Man, I'm going to be excited to read some of these chats later in my own time as well. There's been a lot of people contributing, which is great. ADHD exists. Women most affected. I'm not a big fan of calling mental diseases fake without hard evidence. Yes. That is very important because, especially because like mental disorders are much harder to prove, which in a way makes it more devastating when someone calls it fake. You can't. What are you going to do? Take your brain out of your skull and go, no, look, the dopamine receptors aren't, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So it is important to try not, obviously everything should have a reasonable level of skepticism, but, not to like a damaging degree, I guess is the way to go. Calling mental disorders fake sounds like a mental disorder. Yep. Look, it's the funny thing, right? A lot of the people who call ADHD fake probably have ADHD because they're just thinking, oh, why is this being called a disorder? This is just normal, right? This is just life. It's just life, man. It's just life. And it's just like, mon frère, if you think that this is normal, you might want to go to a psychiatrist. You might want to get looked at. Just a little. You might that you have something in your brain. Just something in your brain. So I will be back in just a moment. So yeah, just keep an eye on this guy for me. Yeah, you want to talk about understimulating? Watch the Eternals. That was a little bit of torture right there. A little bit of slice of home. Should edit that image so it is meme. What I actually want to do with that celestial thing is I want someone to go in and like have a boat occasionally go by, animate the clouds a little bit, have like the boat horn occasionally play and go, oh, what the hell is that? But it comes up only like every 3 hours or so. So it's like a really rare Easter egg. That would be funny. Meme actually has me interested in doing a pseudo systematic review on this. Oh, awesome. I love getting people interested in this stuff. And exploring it in their own ways, because I like it when people get interested with these subjects, because I think there's so much to learn, and if I can just present things in a way that makes it so that people want to learn more and do their own research and do all kinds of things with it, I'm just that's wonderful for me. That's really that tickles me in a good place. This has been extremely educational and therapeutic to listen to. Oh, thank you. I'm very happy that I've been able to bring a lot of a lot to the table with that subject, because it's something I've been thinking a lot about. It's something I want to raise more awareness for in a way that's because there's a lot of people who will just like they try to educate you by blaming you, I guess. Like, it's just like, oh, you're part of the problem that this is happening. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I want people to just learn about this stuff and, just raise their awareness of this stuff so that, if they think that they can accommodate better, go for it. But I don't want to shame people for, not understanding things. That's a very good way to get people to not want to learn more about it. Yeah, so I'm very happy about that. Let's see. It's great when someone talks about my disability but doesn't talk down to me. Absolutely. I think that's another thing that's really changed the last the last decade or so, especially, is that we now have a lot of content that doesn't talk down to people. It's just there. It's just talking about it very, frankly and sincerely. For lack of a better term, it's speaking about it on a very human level rather than speaking about it as if, oh yes, I'm just going to, I'm just going to talk down to you, or, oh, it's okay. Either babying people or patronizing them in some other way. It just doesn't work. Shouldn't work that way.